Welcome to another Bandology interview. Bandology is a Canadian nonprofit dedicated to more music for more kids via education, collaboration, and community.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to another episode of What's Your Forte? I'm Kathryn, the business coordinator at Bandology, and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Kirsten, and I am the events coordinator at Bandology, and I go by she, her.
We're joined today with Shaun Brody and Naomi McCarroll-Butler from the Queer Songbook Orchestra and the Queer Songbook Youth Orchestra. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Happy to be here.
Amazing. Awesome.
Okay, so just to start us off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your current position? So since we have a lot of questions, for each one, we're going to start with Shaun and then go to Naomi, just for a clear order.
So when did you first pick up your first instrument?
So trumpet is my main instrument, and I first picked it up when I was 7 years old. I grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan, and there was a community band there it was the Regina Lions Band is what it was called. And you could start as young as 7. So my mom got my sister and I involved in that when I was 7, and my sister was 8. And I've been playing trumpet ever since.
That's nice. Yeah, I play saxophone as my main instrument, but I started singing in church when I was young and playing some piano there. And my dad's a singer-songwriter, so he taught me guitar from, I don't know, a youngish age. But I started playing sax when we played band instruments in school. I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario, and they gave me a tenor saxophone when I was very diminutive, this giant tenor saxophone when a very little kid. And I just fell in love. There was a family friend who taught at Mohawk College who lived up the street, and I started taking lessons, and the rest is history. Moved to Toronto and picked up the clarinet at some point, but it's been a joy the whole way through.
That's awesome. So can you both explain your current position, so your career, whatever, and what drew you to pursue that career?
As I started playing quite young, and I hated the trumpet at first, and going to band rehearsal, and there was a marching band sort of aspect to it too in Regina. So early Saturday mornings, and I begged my mom to let me quit for the first couple of years. But I'm very grateful now that she really encouraged me to keep at it, and a couple of the instructors in the band that were really encouraging as well for me to stick with it. And so I did, and then I more and more fell in love with it as I got older. And at some point in high school, I decided that's what I wanted to pursue as a career. And I ended up going to the University of Victoria and did a degree in classical performance. And then I had kind of a 10 or so plus year career as a freelancer, but not in the classical world. I kind of drifted into the pop and sort of indie rock world as a horn player. And for many years, I just kind of freelanced in that world. And
who'd you play with, Shaun?
I've played with quite a few people, because as a horn player, I sort of found that nobody really needs you all the time, but everybody can kind of use you some of the time. So there's a lot of flexibility to it. And as you got sort of a bit established in that world, and people would hear you on recordings or live and then be like, oh, I could use you for this song or whatever. So you kind of get passed around between bands a lot. But I would played with Dan Mangan and Bashi Bulat and the Hidden Cameras, Broken Social Scene, Hayden, I don't know, tons of Patrick Watson, tons of groups. After 10 or so years of doing a lot of that and being on the road quite a bit, I was actually looking for a way out of music because I didn't see it sort of being a sustainable career for, the coming sort of decades. And I was sort of looking for a way out, and I decided I wanted to go into journalism because I was really interested in a lot of the sort of narrative aspects of music in terms of like what's happening in the studio, or like the stories behind the, certain records and people's careers. And so I actually applied to go to journalism school, and when I was denied, I was rejected from school. And that sort of, in the wake of that rejection, is what the Queer Songbook Orchestra was sort of born out of, because it sort of gave me an opportunity through that rejection to sort of recognize another opportunity, where I could bring together the these different interests I had, which was music, and the sort of storytelling aspect that I was getting more and more interested in as a aspiring journalist, which never happened. And then my own queer identity, and sort of the intersection and kind of marriage of those three things came together, and the QSO was sort of born from that. So yeah, I sort of founded the project in late 2013, early 2014, and I've been the artistic director ever since. So that's sort of my current position or role within that group.
Right, Naomi?
My current position, I do a lot of stuff. I play saxophone and clarinet, and I teach them. I teach improvisation and sort of breath work for horn players, and it's been a real joy to begin teaching in the very beginning of this new project, the Queer Songbook Youth Orchestra. But yeah, I do a lot of recording and a lot of touring in jazz and free improvised contexts, and some new music and classical contexts as well. And then a lot of working with singer-songwriters and pop musicians and stuff like that, getting the weird little horn things, like what Shaun was saying, they can make the music without you, but you add that little cherry on top. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what got me to pursue music as a career, I first applied when I was applying to music school. I applied to be a teacher because there's some teachers in my family, high school teachers, and that seemed like an attainable kind of career that I could follow. But kind of to my surprise at the time, I got into a performance degree. I thought, maybe I'll do this. I really liked writing music. I really liked knowing what I was going to play before I played it, and organizing, like arranging and getting large groups of people together. And it's funny because I've ended up doing that a little more, but mostly what I've ended up doing in my career is a lot of improvisation and a lot of kind of learning how to ground in the moment with my instruments and with the people around me. And those are the things that kind of keep me going in this. The part of music that you can't really touch, that where you can forget yourself for a moment. You can just sort of end up being a bit of it all beyond you. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure when that happened for me. I began touching that kind of beautiful source of music, I think, when I was in high school. And now I get to live a life where it's almost banal. It's just around me so much. And that's the greatest gift that I could ask for,
Amazing. And I guess as you both have, your music careers, and you kind of explained that, who were some of your major influences or mentors along the journey?
Well, I guess for me, it was really records when I was young that really sort of inspired and motivated me along that path. And as a young player, I was getting into sort of like orchestral playing, but also jazz. And I think when I discovered Clifford Brown, that was a big moment, you know, because I just kind of couldn't believe what I was hearing. And so that, and I mean, it was so inspiring and so unattainable. Also, I felt, but a real motivation. I would say Clifford Brown and Stravinsky were like my sort of some early influences, are just like musicians that I really kind of latched onto and really loved their music.
That's amazing. And Naomi, what are some of your influences?
I think the first time I ever heard an alto saxophone was on Birth of the Cool. My dad used to play that Miles Davis record every time he made dinner. Yeah. So I heard it a lot. And the first time that Lee Konitz takes a solo on that record is this sort of like, it's the most wide open, mellifluous, strange sound. And he drags and he drags and he drags until he's drifted back an entire beat over the course of about 3 or 4 bars. And I found it the most mind-blowing sound I'd ever heard. And this was back when I was maybe 5, 6 years old. I remember not knowing what it was because I'd heard saxophone on like 70s rock, 80s rock tracks, the sort of blazing, like bright tenor saxophone sound. But it was always that sort of like round, mysterious thing that captured my interest. Yeah. So that was maybe the first time. But I mean, since then, it's just been so many. I've had the pleasure of studying with Pat LaBarbera when I studied at Humber College, and he played with Elvin Jones and everybody. A lot of really, like, I got a lot of the tradition from him, which was amazing. And then I got to study with Matana Roberts, who continues to be a great inspiration to me. She lives in New York City and does work that investigates her own bloodline and her own identity. And it's really through storytelling and poetry, spoken word, in her compositions, along with her saxophone playing, has these beautiful tapestries of sound. Yeah. So she's been a big inspiration in terms of my own voice and my own work as well. Yeah. The other person I might say is Jen Shu, who I also met through that BAMF program in jazz and creative music. She is one of the founders of the We Have a Voice collective, which is for women and gender minorities in music, in the jazz and improvised music world in particular. And as well as being one amazingly interesting artist in her own right, amazing vocalist and composer and player of many instruments. She's also just like someone who lives this strange music industry life with a lot of integrity and a lot of love and community care. Yeah. So that's the kind of trajectory. I'm pretty early on in my own life in this, I'm 28, but I see myself becoming someone like that in the community someday. Yeah.
That's great. Seems like you both have met a lot of wonderful musicians and mentors, and you have a lot of inspiration from music itself, which is amazing. So I know that you guys have said that you've met and you're kind of in, the music and pop industry. I mean, Shaun, you are the artistic director of the QSO. You probably have a lot of like major events, but do you have any career highlights that you can think of?
Yeah, several. Kind of in hindsight, I see like the QSO has been the last 8 years, and then there's sort of the career I had prior to that. And there's highlights in both, but I guess, I mean, there was musical highlights for me, and kind of what Naomi was saying earlier about these moments, these sort of like untouchable moments in actually creating music. And there were some of those on stage. I can remember being on on stage with this band called the Bigotanias in Vancouver years ago, and it was sort of like a folk trio with like bass and guitar, or bass and drums, backing them up, and I would come and play on a few songs. And I remember this, like, just sort of improvising in this context where I felt like I elevated out of my own body, and it's this sort of very hard to describe sensation of just being so kind of in tune with what's happening, and sort of contributing something that really feels right in that moment. And they're quite rare, I think, those moments, and that is such a vivid memory for me. Is like a real sort of highlight as a personal sort of musical moment. And then there's lots of other things, like this audience might be too young to know, but maybe some of the parents, like the David Letterman show, which I got to play on before he retired, which is kind of like a late night talk show that I grew up, watching. And it was always sort of like, as a kid, I never would have imagined sort of being on it or like playing on it. But a band I was touring with years ago had the chance to be the musical guest, and so I got to do that. That's definitely like a highlight. And then with the QSO, I feel like every night we're together is a highlight, and because with our shows, we never really do the same thing twice, where I was working with different people and there's a different energy from the audience. And it's so often been, like more often than not, it's been a really sort of feels like a kind of a cathartic experience whenever we're doing these shows. So yeah, it would be hard to even pick what the highlights are. It feels like every time we're together, and even if it's a smaller community where it's not a very big audience, it usually feels like we're connecting with someone or some people in the audience that really need to sort of hear and witness what it is that we're doing and that we're sort of giving from the stage. So yeah, I feel like I don't know if I'd say every day with this project is a gift, because there's a lot of days of just having to sort of, be typing emails and running into dead ends with trying to find new opportunities and stuff. But every night that we're on stage, I would say is definitely a gift.
It's true about the QSO, and it's true about what you have fostered and built. And I mean, we as a community have fostered and built, but you instigate and organize, and it's really special. It's really special, and it's something that I had always hoped that the music that I could make could do to community, in community for people. And it's something, I think it's because we're stepping into a situation where there's a real vacuum. There's a real lack of representation, and people having spaces where they can just not have to be hypervigilant or worry about performing for anyone, or they can drop some of the rigmarole that you have to keep up as a queer person in society a lot of the time, and just be with community, So yeah, I think the way that it's structured is cool. I don't know how much you or the listeners know about the structure of, what the QSO does, but there's always storytelling involved in every show, and whenever possible, Shaun reaches out to folks from the community that we're playing, and they will read stories that have to do with the music that we're playing. So a lot of the time it recontextualizes songs that people may know, like David Bowie songs, Tracy Chapman songs, and rearranges them in the mood of the story or the person's experience that's being shared. So it's cool because you hit a lot of stops, you know. You actually get to know folks in the city that you're playing in. You get to sometimes hear their own stories. You get to hear stories from people all around Canada, because there have been call-outs for submissions for folks all around Canada, and then you get to hear this music that you may know and love, presented often in a subversive and very different, lush kind of way. Yeah.
Wow, that's so incredible, and how you guys kind of experience music is just something I think all musicians have a different experience in a way, but they can definitely relate to you know, all these experiences. So then, kind of with that in mind, why do you think that music education is important? Shaun, why don't we begin with you?
I mean, it's important in so many ways. Naomi and I wouldn't be doing what we're doing without it. You know, like I started to engage in music education as a 7-year-old, and you know, without that support and those structures existing, I never would have found a way, I don't think, into performing myself and being involved in that way. And I don't come from a particularly musical family, so I wouldn't have been learning instruments at home or something. It was something that had to happen sort of externally. Yeah, it's interesting to be on this side of it now, where, I mean, I've taught trumpet for many years, private lessons. So there's that aspect of education where I've been engaged for quite a while, and which I have always loved doing. And that's like an instrument that I'm very invested in, have many years of experience with, and I can kind of like help guide younger players along their journeys. But with the way that the Queer Songbook Orchestra has been expanding in these last couple of years, now we're sort of in a different position as kind of educators and mentors as well. So I'm sort of seeing it from the other side in a way for the first time. And now, especially from the way we're approaching it, I can really see the value in not just music education on its own, but trying to approach it in a way that provides a sort of new avenue, and something that is quite open and accepting and encouraging of different experiences, and something where, I mean, we've had a call out for the past year for youth to sort of express interest in our youth orchestra. And something we heard a lot from people who filled out the survey is that they were really seeking a place where they could connect with community and connect with other queer identifying youth musicians, because they really love music and they wanted to be able to practice that in a space where they could be themselves. And also, but what also was expressed to us was that young people today are not necessarily always feeling comfortable in the ensembles that they have had access to through the schools and communities and all of that, and that an ensemble where they could really actually be themselves is something that they're really seeking. So yeah, I've just kind of come to realize that music education is really important from these other angles too, or these sort of additional layers that maybe don't always necessarily get a lot of thought. There's a lot of focus on the music part, of course, and as there should be, but maybe we could think a little more broadly around like identities and safe spaces and all that when we're making these ensembles as well.
Amazing. And Naomi, what are your perspectives on this?
As you were speaking, Shaun, I was thinking about so many experiences I've had and stories I've heard, and just, I know we're not allowed to swear on this, but I want to. Just so much of music education is really hard on people, on their mental health, on their physical health. It's a sort of tough love, old school way of thinking that can be very disempowering, you know? And it's really a shame, a huge shame, because the potential that music has in community and just in someone's life is can be incredibly empowering. And so I always try and refocus that, in whether it's in my private lessons or in my work as a clinician, or work with the QSYO. Looking forward to doing more work with the QSYO and leadership there, but it's incredibly important. There's a lot of culture. There's a lot of knowing one's place in a larger trajectory of history that can happen in music. You know, you learn what music from 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago sounded like, where you're living, from where your family is from various places around the world. And it exposes you, kind of like learning a new language, to whole new ways of looking at the world and whole new ways of feeling what it means to be human. And I think that those are the, you know, incredible possibilities of music. And yeah, what I hope to change, or what I hope to improve in some little way, is some of the disempowering ways that music education can happen.
And just, if I can, like the healing qualities of music, and the healing potential, and how that can kind of get lost in the ways that we were all sort of brought up to.
I feel like there's internal healing. There's like healing. I grew up singing in church and stuff, and there's like the whole many spiritual traditions of music. There are traditions of music that connect you, I don't know, to who you are, like figuring out all the aspects of who you are. And a lot of that is tied up with different musical traditions, and the reclamation of that, especially in the context of like North America, where a lot of us have our roots elsewhere, can be a really powerful thing.
Yeah, I love all of those interesting perspectives you guys have on music education. I think it's so important, just as like an expression of the self, and as well as like all the history and culture you mentioned, as well as like it's just a really great coping mechanism. Like I can say that for myself at least. Music is just has endless benefits, and I think it's important that everyone notices that, and especially to young musicians as well. And I just want to ask if you guys had any advice to those young musicians that are interested in a music career.
There's this sort of obvious advice I feel like I shouldn't overlook, which is like practice, definitely. But as importantly, I would say just be curious, and like follow your intuition with what you're interested in, and like keep going down that path, because I think like a passion for what you're studying and like working on and practicing will really, if you're really loving that music and that whatever it is that you're working on, it will really allow you to push it further and like go deeper into it, which will have even greater results in the end. And I got really great advice from my my trumpet teacher in university, Lou Ranger, who was former like associate principal of New York Philharmonic, a really beautiful player, beautiful person, great teacher, and a really caring teacher as well, which, as Naomi was sort of alluding to, you don't always find. and he could, I mean, he was playing in New York Philharmonic in the 1970s, and he had seen how that world was changing, you know, and how difficult it is to sort of pursue certain types of work in the, you know, and getting a job as an orchestral player is an increasingly difficult thing to do. But that was sort of my aim when I was studying with him, at least at the beginning. But then I started playing, like a Cuban band started at the school, and I joined that. And there was some like pop stuff happening on the periphery that I started to play in, and just these different styles of music that I was interested in and starting to get involved in. And he really encouraged me to pursue all of those things and to just become like a really well-rounded player, because being like confining yourself to one sort of box, even though it's kind of probably necessary if you're going to be going for that, like that seat in the orchestra, it really limits you in other ways. Like, I don't know, it feels like if people don't get that orchestral job, then you can continue to freelance and work in many ways and teach, but you might be at risk of like losing steam or like losing interest or getting frustrated. But if you have a more rounded interests and skills and sorts like things that you're involved in musically, then there's all these avenues to pursue, and you never know what can kind of come from that. And in my own journey in my career, I never really knew where I was headed since I was in university. I just tried to keep an open mind and pursue the things that interested me and that felt right and that was working with good people. And it really led me to interesting places. And my sort of motto for a while was to just always say yes to gigs, you know, and that's not necessarily a great advice or a great idea, because there are things that you want to be more wary of and not say yes to. But I think it's really valuable to be very curious, and just pursue things and see how it feels, because you never know where that might lead or who you might meet, and what could kind of grow from that. So my, I guess, main advice would be to not approach it in like a rigid fashion, but just be open, be really open to possibility and to collaboration, because some really beautiful and unexpected things can kind of grow from that.
Totally. I don't know if any of us in this industry know where we're headed, unless you have like a 10-year job in an orchestra, I guess. But yeah, like how many of us in this industry is that? Like less than 1%, very much less than that, you know? And so, you know, yeah, I think the majority of people I see who are burnt out or end up not only leaving, like people talk about like leaving music as being such a tragedy, which it's not. People choose what's good for them, and I'm so proud of people doing that. But what I do see is sometimes people being very jaded, and very feeling like they wasted something, or like something was owed to them, and because of all the work they put in, and they never got the dividends that they deserved, or something. But a lot of that attitude, some of it's real because the industry is hard, right? A lot of that attitude also comes from a closed-mindedness or an idea of like, this is the one thing that I do, and this is the one way to go about it. And if I fail at this one thing, then I am a failure. When in truth, you get to choose what you want to do. You know, there's not one right way to play your instrument. No matter how many, you know, like practice what your teachers say, whatever, but also listen to music. This is what I discovered with the saxophone. I was like, oh my gosh, like there's Fela Kuti. He's playing the saxophone in a totally different way than a classical saxophone is. There's, you know, John Coltrane. There's like the 80s poppers. There's all, you know, there are so many ways forward, and follow what interests you and follow what really actually speaks to your heart and what is coming to you, because who knows what can happen. Yeah. Personally, I got a lot of work out of picking up the bass clarinet, which was completely unexpected. I didn't know anyone liked that instrument, but it turns out a lot of people do. So, you know, just because I do I play saxophone and then this also weird instrument, it's ended up working a lot in my favor. Like things like little add-ons like that can be good career choices, even if they don't necessarily seem that way at first. Yeah.
I love the advice. And I know that can be very inspiring for somebody who, you know, is kind of considering music as their pathway or their journey. Thank you so much for sharing all this cool stuff about your careers. We just want to ask a few quick questions about the QSO and QSYO. So Shaun, can you tell us just really briefly how the QSO was formed and kind of when you rehearse? And how often you rehearse and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess it was formed. I spoke a bit about this earlier in terms of where I was at when it came about, and the sort of intersections of my identity and my interests, my experience, and just sort of thinking that there may be space for a project like this that sort of recognized and kind of celebrated queer experience in a different way that wasn't, or that I didn't see it was already happening. And it felt like there was, space there for maybe something new. And yeah, with my sort of interest that I mentioned earlier in like the backstories of what was going on behind certain recordings, or I've always liked documentaries that kind of like go into the studio or like talk about classic albums or Motown and, you know, this kind of thing, like just to learn the history of all that. And I thought, well, there's probably a lot of queer history that isn't necessarily known, or like, you know, so much of pop music has come from queer writers and queer performers, but all that was swept under the rug at the time because it had to be for people to survive and have a career. So there's a real richness in that history that isn't sort of really being recognized. So anyway, this is sort of the motivation for it. And then I decided, and I had one foot out the door of a career in music at all at this point. In 2013, I told most of my friends that I was quitting music and I was, you know, didn't know what I was going to do. And then I was like, wait a minute, maybe I don't want to leave music and maybe I actually want to start my own band. But it's not just a band, it's like going to be 12 people, which is fairly ambitious to have as your first band when you've always sort of been a side musician. But I just sort of believed that there was something to this idea that was really worth exploring. So I started calling a few friends who I thought would fit well in the band. And the first person I called was our drummer, Steph Schneider, who is one of my oldest friends. We used to be pen pals when we were in university, and not email pals, like actually writing letters and putting them in the mail. And we were both sort of deep in the closet when we were first introduced by a mutual friend. And we've had this whole growth journey together where we both sort of came out to each other, and then we met in person, and we've just had a really beautiful, like, long friendship. And he's a wonderful drummer. So I called him, and I kind of knew okay, if Steph is into this idea, and if he thinks it's a good idea and he'll like be in this band with me, and we had actually never even played in a band together, but I thought if he'll do it with me and he sort of supports me, then I'll go ahead and try to do it. And yeah, so I called him and we had a good chat, and I was kind of nervous even with him about saying this idea because it was very much out of character for me. And I told him the idea, and he was like, yeah, I think that's a good idea and we should go for it. And then that's kind of all the encouragement I needed. I was like, okay, Steph's with me, so I'm going to push forward and see where this can go. And then I called a few other friends, Tom Gill and Alex Samaras, and we sort of started to establish these pillars of the ensemble. And then the other thing that was happening alongside that was there was a great queer performance space in Kensington Market on Augusta called Videofag, which was run by, at the time, a young couple that were both like in the theater world. Jordan Tannehill was one of the people there running it. He was a playwright and an author, and he's quite well known now. And they ran this space that was like a really open, accepting gallery performance space where they were showing plays, they were showing movies, artwork, and it was kind of like an anything goes DIY sort of queer space. It was super inspiring. They have good parties there, and it became a real, for the few years it was around, a real community hub that really sort of it existed at the right time for me because I found it very inspiring. And it's sort of when the idea for the QSO started to come around, I thought, okay, we need to do our first show at this space at Videofag. And so I started meeting with Jordan. We would have breakfast every week or two and sort of talking about how this could work in the space. And yeah, and then in March of 2014, we did our first show. That was a very small space. The band took up half the room. So we did 2 shows over the weekend with like maybe 30 or 35 people max in the audience. And we kind of knew from that first night that we were onto something special, and we had to sort of keep going forward with it. And we just have now, it's 8 years later, and we now have a youth orchestra. We've toured all over the country, and we have a show for elementary schools. And it's really sort of blossomed in a pretty beautiful way. I was going to say surprising, but in a way, no, because I think those early feelings I had that this could be worthwhile and valuable, because I kind of felt that from the beginning. It hasn't really surprised me that we've found a path through this. But to answer the second part of the question, how often do we rehearse? Not very often. I mean, the nature of this band, it's all like very good musicians in it. So everyone's a professional, and we can kind of like put things together fairly quickly. And everybody's also very busy with 1,000 other projects. So to get people in the room, we usually will have 1 rehearsal before a show, and if we're lucky, maybe 2. And then we have kind of a growing roster of subs too, because sometimes people are available, so we call in other people to fill in. And this coming weekend, for example, we're playing a show, and a few of our regulars aren't available, so I think we have 3 new people coming in, and so we are rehearsing before this one to give everybody a fair chance to learn the material. So
that's awesome. And so you rehearse in Toronto, I believe?
Yeah, we've done shows where we're in Vancouver and there's not enough money to take the full band, so we hire some Vancouver players, and then we rehearse once there before a show or that kind of thing. So we kind of have picked up people in other cities too to fill in. But generally, yeah, we rehearse in Toronto.
Do you want to just explain all about how the QSYO was formed and, just like also how often you rehearse and where you guys are at?
Yeah, okay. Well, Shaun honestly knows a lot more of the details and behind the scenes stuff because I am, well, I suppose I'm an instructor in the QSYO. We didn't actually end up having any clarinetists sign up. So, hey, shout out to clarinetists. If you're queer or allied and want to play in our orchestra, we could totally use you. But the band, let's see, started maybe 2 months before the show, the youth orchestra, out of Omicron. Yeah, a little earlier maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, April, yeah.
Okay, great. April, and then the
Months,
show was in June. Yeah. What I really liked, and then there were rehearsals every week, and the last week before our show with Luminato with Beverly Glenn Copeland and Elizabeth Glenn Copeland, there were maybe 4 rehearsals the week leading up to that. Yeah, they were at a few different locations depending on where was available for a group that big. Yeah. But what I really liked about the rehearsal process was that it's a mixed ensemble. So it's the students playing with the professionals and a lot of sort of multi-age kind of communication relationships starting and mentorships happening. Not even necessarily on the same instruments, but just a really good kind of community vibe. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love how you have that representation for the youth as well in music. So I also just wanted to ask to anyone who's interested in watching this podcast, how can someone join the QSYO?
Well, there's a sign up on the queersongbook.com. Yeah, Shaun?
Yep.
Yeah. So queersongbook.com is the website. And that has stuff for all the Queer Songbook Orchestra, Youth Orchestra, QSO Kids, everything that we do. And there's an expression of interest survey that will you fill out with your instrument and what you're interested in and what grade you're in or whether you're at university or college or whatever. That is the way to get in contact and see if you can join. Yeah. I'm not quite sure what the plans are for the coming year, Shaun. Are we at any place to talk about those or no?
Well, we have ambitions and we're going to see. I mean, as Naomi mentioned last month, we did a show with Luminato, with Beverly Glenn Copeland. We had a 50-piece orchestra of the youth and mentors that we did this show with. And that was it's kind of a major first hurdle in establishing this new ensemble. And I feel like the fact that we did that and we made it work and we actually pulled it off. Now the sky's the limit with what we can do with this group. And we are still open to new players. So if anybody who's listening or watching, as Naomi said, go to our website and there's a QSYO page on the website that talks a little bit more about the project, and it has that expression of interest form. And yeah, if you fill that out, then that's just an easy way for us to keep in contact and let you know what's going on. And I think we will start to assemble again in the fall. And every year we do a holiday show, which we also acts as a fundraiser for different organizations that we've supported. So that'll likely be the next show with the youth orchestra, is having that holiday show in December. So in the fall, maybe by October, something we'll start rehearsing and preparing for that.
Wow, it just sounds like such an incredible opportunity. And so now at the end of our interviews with Bandology, we usually ask a series of fast 5 questions. So it's rapid fire. You just say the first thing that's on your mind. And so that there's, no time to think about your answers, you're just going to have to go one after another. And Shaun will go first.
Because I have to go first. Every time, can Naomi go first?
Okay, I'll go first.
I think
I
that sounds,
volunteer as tribute.
I think that sounds like a good plan. Yeah. So are you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay. What is your favorite movie soundtrack?
Harry Potter.
Shaun?
Oh, I have to do it too.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to get another question. I don't know. These are the questions I'm worst at, where I'm like put on the spot and I have to pick a favorite. I don't know. I'm gonna say "Call Me by Your Name" because that just came to mind. I don't even know what's my favorite.
I love it. I love it. And Harry Potter is definitely one of my favorites too. And what is the instrument that you wish you played?
There's so many answers. I really want to play the small pipes, the Scottish small pipes. They're so beautiful. They're like chill bagpipes, the clarinet of bagpipes. Yeah, I wish I played those.
Wow, good answer.
Yeah.
For me, piano. I've wanted to for years, and I just love the piano, and I wish I had more facility on it. So I'm working on it, but that's the one for me.
Nice. And I just have to say that I said the bagpipes to this question. That's the one I wish I played too.
Warms the cockles of me heart.
Yeah, like really interesting responses. Okay, so this one's a tricky one. What is your hidden talent? Doesn't have to be super hidden, but maybe something that most people don't know.
I really like to draw. Yeah. And I think I'm okay at it.
Shaun?
Nothing about me is rapid, by the way. Like, I'm really one of the slowest people, so rapid fire really throws me for a loop.
You're perfect.
Yeah, I would like to say it's cooking, but it's not really true. But it's something I would like to be a hidden talent. Maybe it will be at one point.
You enjoy it. You enjoy cooking, so
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Awesome. And what was your musical inspiration or something that you enjoyed listening to growing up?
Growing up, I loved My Chemical Romance. I was like heavy in the My Chemical Romance in their heyday. That's when I was in middle school, high school, and like the fact that, I mean, first of all, Gerard Way wrote Umbrella Academy. The singer, right, is one of the co-writers of that, and so I've just been obsessed with that, and it's very, MCR in its aesthetic. And then also MCR is coming back in 2021, 2022. Oof, honey, we're in the middle of it. It's good. New goth revival.
I can remember being fairly young, or I don't know how old, but I really got attached to that Naomi, the collection of Miles Davis records. It's like cooking, working, relaxing. There's four or five of them. And I just remember like going really deep into and unlike I mentioned Clifford Brown earlier, but Miles was such a different kind of player, where it seemed like he might be able to lift one of the solos more than what the stuff Clifford was doing. So that's what I'll say.
Awesome. All right. So what is your favorite concert that you've attended?
Ooh, hands down, Wayne Shorter Quartet. They came to Massey Hall in 2013 when I was out of high school and just kind of beginning to like figure out what I liked and what kind of music I wanted to make. And no kidding, Wayne Shorter, this is his 80th birthday tour. So he was going on a tour around the world, this man playing the soprano saxophone with this beautiful quartet of like younger, amazing jazz musicians. And I found myself in the middle of this concert not even aware, I just came to my body screaming and covered in sweat and standing up. Like he played with that amount of power at 80 years old. And my God, I still think about it to this day, just to be able to command energy like that, let alone at that age, is amazing. So I'm going to remember that the rest of my life. I think that's my favorite concert I've ever been to.
I want to give two quick ones. One was Prince at the Air
really?
Canada.
You saw Prince?
I saw Prince at the Air Canada Center, like, I don't know if it was maybe 2011 or 12, something like that. And it was like a last minute decision. I just looked online, bought a single ticket and went by myself and, sat in the rafters, and it was amazing. And really grateful that I saw it. And then I saw Stevie Wonder. I was at the Glastonbury Festival playing with a band, and then Stevie Wonder was like the main stage Sunday night, final night show, and this massive stage, and there's a huge hill. Glastonbury is a big festival in the UK, and there's a big kind of embankment on the side, and we're sitting at the top of that, watching Stevie Wonder. It was awesome.
That is so fun. I love all these memories. Just to wrap up, do you have any exciting plans or new projects coming up?
I just finished the big residency with the Toronto Jazz Festival, which has been 6 months in the making. And just 2 days ago, we performed the whole suite of music that I wrote with a great group of friends, 13 of the greatest musicians I could ask for. And it was good. And it was an hour of my life. When you work so hard at something and then it's gone, off into the air, off into memories. So my next thing is to think, okay, some of this material, I really want to, I do some like home recording and work with synthesizers and drum machines and stuff. I want to make an album of this music and some other music, partially with this 13-piece large ensemble jazz band, and partially with home, like with synthesizers and synthesized sounds, drum machines and stuff. Yeah. So that's my next undertaking, and we'll see how that ends up happening. Often you end up embarking on a project thinking it's going to be one way, and it completes itself in a completely other way. So yeah, but that's what's coming up. QSO's got some fun stuff too. We're going to Northwest Territories in 2 weeks, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I don't know when this will air. Maybe we've already been there by the time this is heard. But well, on July 10th, in a few days, we have a show in Campbellford, Ontario, with this concert series called West Bend, and we're playing in a big old barn on a farm out there, which will be really lovely. And then next week we go to Yellowknife. Folk on the Rocks is the festival up there, and we're going to be doing our kids show there on like the family stage, and then our regular set as well that weekend. And that kind of wraps up a busy few months for the QSO. That's kind of this reopening of live music and all that stuff, and a lot of these things we've been doing lately have been pushed back over the last few years. Things that were supposed to happen in 2020, and now they're finally getting a chance. So we've had a really busy few months, and now after Yellowknife, there's some downtime and some time to kind of like reassess and figure out what we're doing going forward, and with the youth orchestra and all that stuff. So I'm looking forward to having that space to kind of reimagine and think about what comes next without the pressure of having to perform almost weekly as it's been lately.
Wow. Okay. It sounds like there's some exciting things in the works, especially really, really close right now. And best of luck in the future.
Thanks so much.
And right back to you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been a treat. Thank you so much for your interest and your time in the project.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
And anyone listening, we're always looking for more people for the family, for the QSYO. So,
Yeah.
check us out online and see what you think.
Yeah. So thank you so much, both of you, Shaun and Naomi. Thanks for joining us in this episode of What's Your Forte and for telling us about the QSO and the QSYO. We had such a great time learning more about you guys, your careers, your organization, and also your experiences. It was a pleasure getting to interview you both. And thank you to everyone listening. I hope you learned something about this amazing organization and these amazing people. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you on the next episode of What's Your Forte.
Thanks for joining us. If you like what you heard, you can learn more about our organization at bandology.ca, which features information about music education, advocacy and research, and our Play a Gig and Bandcamp programs. Follow us on social media for more videos, performance, and interviews on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.